Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit.
Welcome to Magister Dixit, a podcast that invites you on a journey into realms of expertise, imagination, and occultism. Delve deep into the minds of those that have dedicated their lives to mastering their crafts, and how having an esoteric or supernatural influence has shaped that path. In each episode, we will engage with magisters, true masters of their respected fields, as they share their unparalleled insights, unconventional knowledge, and their unique perspectives. Venture into the mystical as we converse with filmmakers, musicians, and renowned authors. Listen to their perspectives on their respected disciplines and how being a practitioner of occultism has influenced their craft. Remember, in the realm of knowledge, Magister Dixit, the master has spoken. In this episode, we're joined by Dr. Tom Erik Raspotnik, an esteemed scholar, practitioner, and educator. With over 30 years of experience in the occult, ancient religions, and ceremonial magic, Dr. Tom has explored and contributed significantly to various mystical traditions, including Theistic Satanism and other ancient Sumerian beliefs. As a scholar, Dr. Tom has authored numerous papers, studies, and contributions that shed light on the complexities of Theistic Satanism and the interplay between religion and mysticism throughout history. Join us as we explore Dr. Tom's experiences, wisdom, and profound understanding gained through decades of dedicated research, practice, and scholarly endeavors in the realms of the occult and ancient mysticism. Let's welcome Dr. Tom to the show. Dr. Tom, I'd like to welcome you to Magister Dixit, and it's just so easy to talk to you, and I wanted to hit record right away and everything, but why don't you share with us like some of your early life background that eventually led you to explore into the realms of the occult and ceremonial magic? Did your upbringing or your early experiences as a kid shape your interests, your beliefs in these profound domains?
A lot of people won't. I always like to tell people the funny story of when I was younger, and I didn't, I've never believed in this. I was born into, and I've always been a theistic Satanist. And even though you've seen some transformation, I've transformed via the truth I found in the path. But I started out kind of I grew up in a small town. In a small town, I didn't have access to books and things like that a lot of people did. But my family background was my dad was an atheist, never went to church in his life. And he never was, kind of an atheist that went out there and said anything. He just said, I'm not going to church. You don't have to go to church. This family doesn't go to church. But my mom was a Norse pagan, so they kind of gelled together real well. My mom never took me to any meetings or anything like that, even though I've been to Norway like 16, 20 times. My mom was actually from Norway. Her family was Norwegian, and also her last name was Krelhusen, which they were also Iraqi. So I had that influence that kind of influenced me later in life to examine the world of Mesopotamia and find out some roots of, how that would blend into the occult things. And we've seen over many years, people study and put those things together. So I don't talk something that's, new or created by me. But the funniest thing is I grew up in a small town, and I was known as the devil man.
Right?
Yeah, in Michigan, I was known as the devil man, and I'll tell you the reason why. I accidentally set a field on fire near my hometown and burnt 6 buildings down in my town. So they, of course, always come. And then, of course, later when I went on the History Channel and did some vignettes and things that they did on there, and I did Coast to Coast, everyone then really started to believe how much of a devil man I was, Later in life, I converted. I had the very first theistic church. This was 1999 in Dearborn, Michigan, of all places, which is the bastion of the Muslim faith in America. I set up what was called the Temples of Satan there, which was just an office building. A lot of people goes, oh, it was no fancy church, or no, it wasn't. It was just an office front. And we had it until 2007. But I moved it from there back to my hometown and scared the life out of everybody in my hometown. My parents sold me their home, so I moved it to a modular home, which of course the internet blew up jokes, trailer trash, Satanist, whatever else. I had to laugh about that because at least I had a place and people could come and gather and stay, you know. And I let people stay there, and I just basically let them come there, and we studied and did rituals, and we had a huge backyard. We're on 6 acres of property, and it was wooded, and we could kind of do what we wanted to do, and it was nice. We had a lot of meetings, but then with the internet, that started to go down and down and down because people would prefer doing Zoom or prefer yakking at one another on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or whatever instead of going in person. And I still kept that up, but my circle of people grew smaller and smaller to where I've got now just about maybe about 25, 30 members. So been a long way. I went from hundreds of members down to 30 members or whatever.
And am I correct that it was sometime in like 2000 you retired the organization for a little bit and then you started up again in 2020, is it? Or
I ran out of funding. That's what happened. We were from 1999 till about 2009. We were pretty well funded because we had approximately, I would say probably in the range of about 750 people as members, and they were paying like a due system. Wasn't like the Church of Satan where you paid for a card or whatever. We actually would gather together and try to do good things. Like we gave the veterans, we gave them the homeless people. Just we created these projects that we did, and that was set up because one of our board members was originally in Freemasonry, and he, how they always like to give back to community. We did that. Well, we started to run out of funding, so we retreated a little bit, and we kind of went back to a smaller group of people, just because of funding. I mean, these people want to talk about opening these grand churches, but again, coming from a business world, I'll tell you, being a church or being a temple or whatever you want to call your organization in the occult, it's a costly thing, and it's a costly from the standpoint of you might have to reach in your own pocket and pay for the rent because sometimes members don't want to give you rent. It doesn't work like Christianity or Judaism or Islam where you tell people out of the goodness of your heart. A lot of people in the occult are very much, they've gotten scammed. They've had a lot of things happen to them, so they're very gun shy giving any kind of donations to keep the church.
I think you could say that maybe to generally all the population. I mean, in today's world, the dynamic is, you want to round up and you want to give to this and give to that. And, you're just trying to pay for your groceries and get out the door, So I think a lot of people question these larger organizations, like the United Way and stuff, where you find out the CEOs making, it's not like they're doing philanthropy because they're already rich and they donate their time. In fact, they're drawing a salary. In fact, they're like in the top 10 CEOs in the country or something like that, So,
I tell people this all the time. We have a board. I guess I call it an organization because it's no longer a church building situation, but we gather once a year, and when we gather, it's usually all self-funded. We all pay for our airfare and pay for our hotels and get together, and we'll buy each other meals or from that standpoint, we get together and do rituals together. But we go to different places because people are so far away from one another. But most everybody, the hard part, this is the funny part, most everybody who's in that organization, we call it a temple, are all over the age of 45. And we find that we invite members under 45, and because we might be in Vegas one year, we might be in Florida next year, whatever, we get maybe one person, and that's just because of affordability issues.
Now, I want to step back just a little bit when we were talking about your early history.
Yep.
Who were some of the mentors or authors or figures in the field of the occult that drew your attention? And what were the first set of books that you were reading, or who was the first magician you read about?
I guess I kind of really when I went to study the occult, I went a little different direction. A lot of other people, I of course, had the Satanic Bible. I had some things like that. I met Anton LaVey back in it was 1996, and I really wasn't that impressed. And I said, you know what, one day I'll have my own gig. But beyond that, I started to read only ceremonial magicians, people who wrote about ceremonial magic. It resonated with me. I just liked the complexity of it. And to this day, I still practice, but I use a system that's what I call the modified Agrippa system, where I've taken Agrippa, I've ripped out Christianity, ripped out Judaism, and replaced it with some of the earlier gods and goddesses. But I am pretty much theistic. I have one god, and that would be Ningishita, who's a Sumerian or Mesopotamian god that I've been a priest to him. I've been, with him since 2004. And but most all of what I read is I read history, and I read ancient history, because a lot of what in Satanism or what Satan talks about is contained there, not contained in New Age writings. I'm not saying that New Age people can't discover new things, but if you go to an academic level and you study history, you'll start putting two and two together and realize this: all people prior to, I would say, the Renaissance period did one thing, and they had it all in common. They feared God. They feared Satan. They feared any type of pagan god or any type of witchcraft god or any of these past. They feared these people enough because they believed that these beings walked among us, and they feared them just like people of the Judaic faith fear God himself. The Christians, their God is all this fluffy, whatever, and Jesus and everybody died for it. Well, in Judaism, they actually fear God. I mean, the same thing happens if you go in history. People feared God, and they feared God to where they wouldn't write negative about him, or they wouldn't make things up. So
always tales of a vengeful God,
yeah.
a wrathful God.
And the other thing was, a lot of people forget about this, is the people of the ancient times, very few people wrote, or very few people could actually speak the language or understand the occult or owned occult books. So I go back the oldest I can, because it was written either by good fraudsters or good scholars, or people who were well connected to the deity. So my rule of thumb is I'm going to read pre-1920, and if it's new, I'm going to read history, and I'm going to read a lot about history. But I'm going to take a book, like, let's say someone brings me a book by, I don't know, let's say Michael Aquino, and then I'm not picking on the late Michael Aquino. I feel he was a good author, great guy. I spoke to him many times, but I'll take that book and I'll look at it and I'll view it from the lens of history, not from the lens of what he's saying, and I'll compare it to what I know. And I'll give you an example of such. History tells us, not me, this isn't Tom Raspotnik speaking, this is history telling us, that Lucifer and Satan are two separate characters. But yet I see people in the occult not being able to disseminate between the two and using both in prayers and rituals. I'm here to tell you, if you're theistic, you're not going to pray to Lucifer or vice versa. You're going to pray to Satan, and Satan even is Hashatan, or a Judaic phrase. So you would pray to something, whatever path you would have in Satanism towards Satan, I guess, or towards it. Satanism is kind of a misnomer. I use the term simply because it's recognizable. I don't say Ningishitiism. You know what I mean?
Sure. And you were kind of touching on something that I did want to talk about, just the fact that your theistic Satanism and your practice of ancient Sumerian spirituality. Of course, I was going to ask you about the Temple of Set and Dr. Aquino, and not so much like your thoughts, but obviously you probably came across those writings, and being that it's very in kind with the belief system that you have as well.
It not really.
Okay. Well, what I mean by in kind is by choosing for the same reasons, choosing the set, and using the Egyptian knowledge and mysticism to represent your Satanism.
I'm gonna tell you why I did what I did with Satanism, and why I did with the name. In 2017, we put together to compact the doctrines, the Constitution, all the requirements to make it a legalized religion. I established it under the root of Sumeria, and I'll tell you why I did. It's not to say there could be thousands of sects of theistic Satanism, of course, just like any religion. I put it together with Mesopotamia because Satan's origin. Keep in mind, if we view Satan on the way that the ancient Hebrews practiced to him, and they did in Kabbalism, there's many mentions of what they practiced to him. But let's go back even further. We figure out where his root goes. Okay, so we go back further into Babylon. Okay, in Babylon, he was connected to a serpent deity, but we go back even further into Sumeria, and he's connected to what they call their Garden of Eden story, but he doesn't appear as a serpent in the Garden of Eden. He appears as a man with serpent arms and one of the most intelligent men. Now, the reason I'm going to tell you about this is because Dr. George Waddell, and he passed away in the 20s, he made a connection between Sumeria and Egypt that was also blindsided by the Hebrews, where they didn't want, or I'm going to say this carefully, but by people of Judaism, it was basically hidden because they didn't want people to discover the connector. However, I will tell you this, and I'll tell you this in front of anybody. If you dig into history, you'll find that Ningishita, okay, who was a deity of wisdom. He's represented by the Caduceus in basically in Sumeria. God of healing was morphed into the bad guy because he sided with God's brother. And I know people are going to be, listeners are going to be like, what? In Sumeria, the God of Abraham had a brother. And in the creation story, which appears in Sumeria, you have Mother Earth, who is with God's brother, okay, the God of Abraham, the God of Judaism, and he teams up with this gentleman who has serpent arms, and you could see the connector. And when you go through the connection of early Babylon, Ningishita becomes Serpent Zeta, later becomes Satan or Hashatan, only because they want to create this character. So it's almost like facets of a stone. They keep filing a new facet throughout history. And I discovered this not on my own. I had people come to me and help me in this, academic people who were way smarter than I'll ever be about archaeology and about philology and topics like this. And they said, Tom, we'll give this to you if you want to use it in the right way. Actually, they started to show me systems of magic that came from Sumeria. However, I warn people, there's a lot of people who talk about Babylonian magic or Sumerian magic, but it's not what people think. It's not designed to curse people. It's not designed to kill your enemies, to be mad at your neighbor, to blow up a house or whatever. It was meant to do one thing, and that was to exorcise demons from people, because they believed that people could be easily possessed, because they believed that demons walked all around us. It was just how we became a magnet to them. So the Sumerians spent most of their time, when they weren't going to the faith that they had of their different deities, trying to ward off demons. So my field of study has always been from the end of demons, ways to conjure, ways to do things like that, ways to produce, ways to bring demons into the world by gates. What I'm not saying is, what I'm trying to say here is, I'm not putting these demons over to kill you. I'm not putting these demons to kill the neighbor, whatever. I'm not commanding any kind of demons. I'm not in charge of any hells. I'm not any of that. Just to help me enhance my life, to help me enhance other people, to heal other people. So I studied all of those books that would involve those subjects. I have never written a book. I've had 100 invites to do books, okay? I've never done a book because I was never that good at grammar, and I don't know. I've got a significant other now that probably will help me, because she's very good at grammar and English. Someday I'll put a book out, but my book's not going to be what people think. It's not going to be my explanation of the world. It's only going to be a view into the history lens of it all. So when I read an occult book, I read an occult book based on history and how it relates. And I know a lot of people don't like those topics, but I do. But then I also get on the phone with many people I know who are even smarter than I am, and we break this stuff down in theology discussions and try to figure out where this root came from. And that's because of my ceremonial magic background. Because in ceremonial magic, you're trying to solve certain things. You're trying to ward things. You're trying to protect yourself. I don't worry about other people coming after me. It's fine. They can, okay? It's not to say I'm impervious to it all, but you're not going to send a demon over my house. It ain't coming knocking on my door. It's going to leave here. It ain't going to come back on you, but it ain't going to go nowhere.
Now, let's elaborate a little bit. Why is it historically accurate? Why is it important to be historically accurate in both the occult teachings and the revival of these ancient beliefs, particularly in the context of today's modern spirituality?
Well, here's
seems like it's very important to you, you know?
Yeah, well, I think here's going to be my opinion. Not this is going to be my opinion on it. I believe because with me having faith in my deity, okay, and I have unwavering faith, and people can call me a Christian or whatever it's fine. They don't understand it. It's okay. I believe that in one way or another that we actually almost are sort of protected by our deity, provided we have strong faith in our deity. So when I try to provide information, the reason I use history is I try to create the best answer for the question by finding it in history and then answering it that way. Because if I say something, I want to be able to back it up. I don't want to make outlandish claims. If you come to me and said, Tom, I want to learn magic from you, it's going to be virtual boot camp. I mean, I'm going to put you through hell, but you are going to learn from me. You may not like what I tell you. I might tell you things like, you know, you're not going to create a demon next week. You're not going to read tarot cards next month, but I will teach you these things. I'll teach you how to do this and this and this, but you're probably not going to like the methodology because I'm going to give you 25 books to read instead of just one book to read. And every one of those books are going to be boring because they might include archaeology, they might include history, they might include etc. Right now, to give you an idea, I'm reading a book series. It's about 14 books on what went on in Nicaea and exactly how Nicaea shaped the creation of Christianity. And people go, why would you be doing that in the occult? Because it's like you want to know what your enemy's up to and you want to know what they're talking about. And that way, if I run into people, I can basically debate them with history and debate them with what was actually said, not what comes off the top of my head.
What are some of the most common misunderstandings or myths about theistic Satanism?
That there's a whole bunch of people who live in a trailer park. But aside from that, there's a lot of people I know. Most of the people, and I'm not saying my group is any better than any other group, but the average income of people, and they make way more than I do, of my group members in what I call the Temple of Serpent is about 150 plus. These people aren't going to want to hang out with a whole bunch of people that are playing goth on the weekend. Okay. It's okay. A lot of them will dress goth, but we're not looking to get, we're not looking to burn a church down and go to jail over it. But, a lot of these people, when I teach them or when we work together on history projects. Like, for an example, where Nicaea, and I swear that this is in history, okay? And there's going to be a lot of people feedback on this that's not going to get it. But if you really look into history, and it was with St. Augustine talking to a couple of these philosophers, but Lucifer, the idea comes from the enslavement of Druids that were brought down from Newgrange, and they practiced to the word Lu. That's what they couldn't really break the language down, but Lucifer was created from a character from these Druid situations, and they added in the fire and the morning star and all kinds of other things from Venus and other things. But it was almost like a potpourri that was put on a table to create a character. And why did they create that character? Because they didn't want to be tied to Judaism and the Satan that was explained. Because history will also tell us that if we break down through the book of Enoch, the book of Enoch, Enoch is really the depiction of Satan. So it's God's taking Satan, because remember, Enoch also is traveling around the globe, as in the Judaic story of Hashatan, where he's traveling around the globe and God's talking to him, and et cetera, et cetera. But this is all tied together because Ezra speaks, and then in Nicaea, they break down the fact that Ezra's lying about Enoch and his connection to God, and Enoch and his connection to the Dark One, they call it, or the Attorney General of God. But this is all connected through history. And I tell people this, and I try to teach people this, but people are more, they want they don't care about the history part of it. They want just the doom and gloom part of it. They want to be able to sell their soul and buy a BMW or whatever. Then the only way to buy a BMW is to go earn it. Okay. But they want these quick answers, so they continually buy book after book after book. I've got hundreds and hundreds of books, okay? And I've probably read 90-some% of them. And out of that percentage, 60% are just horseshit and garbage and cut and paste. And one author copying another author, all copying Crowley. And I mean, it's just like, it's unending. But that doesn't make me smarter than anybody else. It just makes me better when it comes to playing against my competitor or playing against the field of other occultists who may want to attack me. I can identify systems of magic, and the reason that I use the Mesopotamian way is because, again, I found it in history and it's old, but I'm not the only one that found any of this. See, so I tell people, a lot of people think I'm egotistical, but I'm not the only one that found this. I'm not the only one who shares this idea. There's other people who share this idea. I'm sorry that you don't run into it, because typically an occultist runs into a whole bunch of people who create tribalism, and they create tribalism where they go, oh, well, Lucifer's real, I'm going to pray to Lucifer. Okay, well, that's fine. You go pray to your Catholic construct. Meanwhile, I'll come over here and pray to Satan. And someone could say, you go pray to your Judaic construct. No, because see here, Satan goes all the way back to Mesopotamia.
And I've interviewed a few theistic Satanists, and it seems like you all have a very defined, independent perception of what that constitutes. And what I also notice, and what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Tom, is, you know, how important it is to integrate that scholarly research in along with the practical applications of what you're teaching.
You're 100% right.
You know, and I had a question though. How did you go about learning cuneiform and Sumerian?
Went to school for it.
So
Online courses.
you went
and in college.
That was in college in Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan State. Yeah, I took it, and there's better colleges that can teach you much more about it. I've taken probably at least 500 hours of offline, because years ago there wasn't a lot of, you weren't on TikTok and you weren't watching Netflix or whatever. You were watching, whatever the cable mundane channel had. And if you had a good job, you could get HBO and maybe watch Oz or whatever shows they had on at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't do that. I went to courses after work, and I always had a really good job. I mean, I worked in the automotive industry. I tell people in 10 years, to give you an idea, I averaged about 300 to 500 cars sold and averaged about $500 a car commission. So if you do the math, a couple $1 million I made in commission.
Wow.
Well, you know what? I reinvested that in myself. I reinvested that in myself with education. So I went to the best possible video schools because I couldn't really go to Oxford. And I've been to Oxford many times, but I've taken probably, I don't know, maybe 500 hours of courses through Oxford. And people go, why would that be? One of the leading colleges in the world that studies Mesopotamia. I go to Orient University online constantly, and I just love it because with AI, they're constantly coming up with more and more of what was missing. The AI
I've heard about that.
Some cuneiform, and it's blowing people's minds away. And this information, if you read it, it's more relevant than any saga from India, any saga from Egypt. There's just the Sumerian people wrote everything down. it's there, but there's so much mundane writings that you have to parse through it to find the good stuff in it. And what's happening is again, like any other thing, whether it be voodoo, witchcraft, whatever a person's on, all these little cottage industries are popping up. Like in Sumerian stuff, they were around 10,000 years. There's no civilization that was older than them for length of time. So they merged in. They became Syria. They became Iraq. They become all the countries now that exist, but those countries fragmented as well. They became, as Syria, there was once called the Assyrians, okay? The Assyrians were once the Sumerians. The Assyrians today are Syria or Lebanon or Palestine. Those were areas.
Didn't the Assyrians fight with the Babylonians?
Yes, they actually defeated the Babylonians.
Right.
The Babylonians had a short window of rule, approximately about 300 years total. The Sumerians basically got beaten by the Hittites, where people were from Afghanistan, and they were far better fighters because the Sumerians were more scholarly. To give you an idea, it's almost like you're taking the United States Army and you're invading, Harvard University and expecting Harvard to win. They're probably not going to win. And that's what happened with Sumerian. They weren't designed to battle. They battled amongst their city-states, but they weren't warriors per se. Yeah, they had good weaponry, they had good things, but they weren't warriors. They weren't. So what happened where they were defeated and that merged, and they merged with the next society and etc. Just like Genghis Khan did, just like Alexander the Great did. They just basically merged these other societies into one.
Yeah, what was it? Not Nebuchadnezzar, but it sounds just like it. Nabo Plasar or something like that, I think.
It's real. It's an odd saying because I can't really say with the Arabic.
Yeah, I just know it sounds like Nebuchadnezzar, but it's a little different. But wasn't he the one that conquered the Assyrians?
Yes. The Assyrians were removed. Now, here's the thing, though. Eventually, the Sumerians were pushed into what's today known as Armenia or the Albanian region. They were pushed into northern kind of Mediterranean, northeast Mediterranean area, and they existed into the ADs about 500 AD, and then the gods and goddesses of Sumeria, the gods and goddesses of Assyria, Akkadian, all the predecessors kind of disappeared and was replaced by Roman Catholicism, which was the strongest of the time. Not much Judaism, some Islam. And of course, Islam stomped out almost all of the ancient religions, just as Christianity did, just as some Judaism in some places did.
Just as I think, isn't that the same with Islam too?
Yeah.
It's the goal is for everybody to only be, only serve Allah.
Right. And the funny thing about it is I'm okay with anybody's religion. I can have discussions with anybody. I don't get combative with anybody, but I don't like what they've done. There's this group of people who practice some ways of the Sumerian way, and they're called the Yazidi. And unfortunately, the occult is brandished, is kind of adopted the Yazidi as some kind of evil Luciferian people. They're not. I have Yazidi friends. I actually, our church that I have, or our temple, is co-affiliated with some Yazidis because they practice the old ways of Sumerian. But here's the thing: Islam, at the time of ISIL or ISIS, which I'm trying not to be too politically correct here, but when they were created or whatever, however that occurred, and I'm going to leave it that way, they were ethnic cleansing the Yazidis, and that was under the name of Islam. So thousands of Yazidis died, but what they did was they killed the infant children who were males, so they couldn't continue procreate. So they were ethnic cleansing this entire society. You can look this up. Those people ended up going to the Kurdish lands to escape that particular situation. So a lot of people who are Kurdish still practice Yazidism.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of occultists are, because of a few people's idea that Yazidi people are occultists. They're really not. They're not really evil or that. They're a crisscross of the old Sumerian way with a mix of some Eastern Orthodox mixed a little bit with Judaism. They're kind of like a universal God type system, but taking the old gods and relating.
Have you ever done any research on Sufi magic?
A little bit, a little bit. I must say I'm real weak on it because there's a lot of information, but a lot of it's held in Iran and Iraq, and what I found is modern versions of it. I haven't really been able to explore it deep to figure out roots with it, so I haven't really been able to put my head around it. And that's not an excuse. It's just when I view something, whether like I'll give you an example. My mate or my lady is into voodoo, for an example, which I'm okay with, but I already understand the whole system based on the history of it. So if you're going to talk to me about witchcraft, as an example, I'm going to study the history of the root and everything, and I'm going to, quickly be up to par on it. So the same thing with Yazidism, but in Sufism, it's really difficult because I don't speak Arabic, I don't read Arabic, and a lot of the information is hidden in that.
Understood. With all your knowledge of
My head's
ancient the ancient Middle East and stuff, I didn't know if that had been something that you had
I've
also
met
delved
people.
into.
I've met people who practice it, but they were practicing in Arabic, and I absolutely don't speak Arabic. And the odd part is I went to college, and in college, I did have to take Arabic, but I did so poorly at Arabic that I never retained the language, and my mom was always shamed about that because I spoke better Norwegian than I ever spoke Arabic. So my
Okay.
mom was always like, "Well, why didn't you learn Arabic? Why is it you only learn Norwegian?" And I go, "I don't know. It was easy. Maybe my head was already full. I don't know."
Now, I want to explore a little bit more into your practice of theistic
Yeah,
Satanism, and particularly, I want to talk about the ceremonial magic that you perform. Can you talk to us a little bit about it? Like,
yeah, not a problem.
for those of us that are familiar with ceremonial magic, a lot of what comes to mind is Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and
Yeah,
people doing the LBRP and doing some type of invocations or evocation, and then again, like the middle pillar and things like this. Can you tell us about your ceremonial magic?
yeah. I don't like to call it mine. I like to call it developed over time with many others. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I worked with a group of people, and many of these people had been in the path for many years and been in the path longer than I in the Sumerian path. And we took mainly the teachings of Agrippa, and I took a lot of the teachings of Agrippa with his symbolism and his invocation ways. And then we modified it and we changed out the deities with deities that were more orientated towards Mesopotamia. So I always tell everybody it's almost like a card deck. We changed the characters in it. We removed the Christian references. We removed the the Judaic references from it. There were no Islamic references, but we removed anything thereof, and any indications or speaking of the God of Abraham. So we replaced the God of Abraham with his brother, who would have been known as Enki, because the God of Abraham would have been known as Enlil. So if you go back to Sumeria, you'll see the story of the two brothers. And the very first stories of God, you'll see that. So we went on the path of that, and then we traced that path back and how we could open it up a little bit more to not being so male orientated. So we allowed the female in because in the original story from Sumeria, the creation story, we have a female who is Mother Earth, who would have been known Nana or later as Ninhursag. And she played an important part in the creation. So we split that off to where you could actually, if you were a female, you could come into the path and you could actually study that avenue. Now, a lot of people in the occult like to study Hecate. Now, I'm telling you, in Sumeria, if you trace her root, Hecate was not a favorable deity. It's a deity that would just soon kill humans. Okay. but we also open it up should someone want to follow that path. But I always warn people it's not going to be favored amongst the others. So typically, and what I'm getting around to here, and I apologize for the long wording, I'm trying to
No, not at
help
all.
people
Not at all.
understand it,
Please.
is we teach people how to basically create your relationship with the deity you prefer, and then ground yourself to that deity, and then move it back out through the use of invocation and ritual practice or ceremonial practice. And typically that to us involves, we'll use meditation, we'll use many methodologies, but we leave it to the individual operator, because I'm not going to come over and go, guess what, you're not doing it right. I'm going to show you how I do it, and I do it typically layout via the Agrippa methodology, not Crowley, not Franz Barton, not some of the other famous ceremonial magicians. And I'm not saying Agrippa had everything perfect, but what I'm saying is he was one of the first, and he had a deep love for his deity. So I believe that when he created his invocations, when he created his ways of workings, he created them in such a way out of his love for his deity. And with that, I admired that. So I converted that system, not myself, but with many other people. And we modified it to be used in a Mesopotamian way. So we would actually, and I'm sure your listeners will laugh about this. So we practice a form of from healing to exorcism, and people go, oh, it sounds mighty Christian. No, the Sumerians believe fully that people could easily be possessed. So we will work typically, and for the magicians that might be listening, we'll typically use a gate system of opening different gates, and that will be involved in your invocation and your practice of how you open these gates. So you would learn how to open the gates, and the gates would allow you to access different avenues to reach to your deity, not reach out and grab demons and bring them back.
And there's such a long list of Mesopotamian deities. Are they all incorporated into these processes?
Well, in the Sumerian line, or in the Mesopotamian, and I'm going to use Mesopotamia so that way, I can be a little bit more encompassing. The deities were definitely set forth on what they were doing. And I'll give you an example. Enki, for an example, gave the tree, the good tree, to Ningishita. Now, when they refer to the tree, it is referring to the tree of life. And when we look at that, we look at the tree of life and we can compare it to later Kabbalism, where they use different methodology in that. So you can take the tree of life and you can walk it backwards from Kabbalism and find the actual settings, or actually the names for everything on the tree that basically Hebrews were calling it. And you could find it in Sumerian. You just have to dig it. So what you do is you take that, you have to dig for it, not dig it. That sounds stupid, but you have to dig for it. For an example, you can take many of the symbolisms from Christianity, even, or from Judaism, and you can go backwards with them, and you can find its origin root, and then you build your magical system forward as an individual. You might want to just do people harm. We're not trying to say it doesn't exist, okay? But you build your magical system with a base of first honing in your faith and learning how to focus on your faith, and then knowing yourself and using yourself as the catalyst for it. So your invocations are all done with you strengthening your deity, or strengthening your relationship with the deity, and then using that as a catalyst to perform your magical workings. You could take the magical workings in many different directions. You can apply things that you knew prior. You can apply those things, but you're centering it all around your study of focusing in on your deity, not trying to get demons and everything else.
It was funny that you mentioned Enki, because to me, I always, as soon as you said that, I always think of how wasn't he the one who saved the humans from the great flood in the Mesopotamian
Yes.
mythos?
Yeah, it was Enlil who caused the flood, just like the God of Abraham. See, but here's what's happened over the years recently. Enki has been vilified not by the occultists, he's been vilified by the alien conspiracy theorists that want to tell all these different stories about how the Sumerians were aliens and they all came to Earth and they want to get away from, and the atheists love this because it's getting away from the idea that the deities did anything.
The
At the end of
Anunnaki.
the,
Yeah, right. Is
yeah,
that what is the
exactly,
Anunnaki?
exactly. And all that stems from a gentleman by the name of Zachariah Sitchin. And don't get me wrong, he has a lot of
Yes,
good points.
I'm familiar. I'm
He
familiar with him.
has a
Yes.
lot of good points. However, he was trying to be like Von Daniken, but he could never get himself. Remember when Von Daniken did that great late Planet Earth and did all that different movies
Mhm.
and made all the money off the alien theories, okay? He wanted to be the same. He was good at Assyrianology. He was good at that, but he never had any formal training in any of it. He was a professor, I think, in humanities or something like that. And it's not to say I'm the most brilliant person because I'm not a professor, even though I have a doctorate. I have a doctorate in theology as a standalone, okay, and then a master of science in religious theology. That one's from Michigan State. The other doctorate I have, and I'm not scared to admit this, was I took and amalgamated my credits and then just went to online college and did a thesis and let's roll, knowing that I never was going to use my doctorate. I mean, I still am greeted by universities because I hold up my little diploma and go, yeah, I went to Michigan State, I have a master's of science, and they're like, okay, cool, and they let me in. And I don't need to wave the doctor in front of them. I like to be called the doctor. I'll give you an example. I work at a company right now where there's 3 Toms. I'm referred to as Dr. Tom. So I like that. You know what I mean? I kind of like it. So
Yeah, and Zachariah Sitchin, yeah, he's the whole one with the ancient astronauts and
yeah,
the planet Nibiru,
yeah.
all of that. Yeah, it's funny because that all of that is very popular today in today's culture. You know,
Well, I'll give you an example. Nibiru was, it's really not a planet. Nibiru was a city. It was a city state. So in Sumerian, Anunnaki means council of the gods. But until you break down cuneiform and look at the history of it, council of the gods, I guess you could leave it open for interpretation. It probably could be council of aliens or whatever. I guess if I'm open minded to it, but the stories that people are spinning from his stories is what I'm not open minded to. You
well,
know,
I think the thing that always is astounding is the Mesopotamians' vast knowledge of astrology and the planets and the order of things. And I think it's hard for historians to accept that perhaps people were, you know, brilliant back in those times too, you know.
nobody wants to know that. We don't know what they were doing. I mean, to be honest with you, I
And we don't
almost
know
take
what
the
and we don't know what lost cultures that we actually come from, you know, and that's
right.
another great myth. You know, we really don't know how old the pyramids are. We have no clue how they were built. You know, and the only carbon dating you can actually do is on any kind of living material, you know, like wood and things like that that could be carbon dated. You can't carbon date the stone. And there still leaves just like massive gaps in what the historians of today tell you to believe. And then you see like people like that are very popular these days, Graham Hancock and
Yeah.
Randall Carlson
Mhm.
with their possible theories and just how they are vehemently attacked by the what do you want to call it, you know, the status quo, or you know, the historians, you know, that have vested their lives into these other, you know, they've wrote all these books and they've taught for years what they've believed, and they're just not even open to hear the possibilities that, you know, there could have been greater civilizations, you know, further back than 3,000 years. And you know, every once in a while maybe there's a reset button hit, you know, when a comet
Well,
strikes the planet. Or
think about this. The Sumerians, they invented time, they invented the calendar, they invented months, days, years, etc. They invented many things. Okay, they invented the first algebra. They invented trigonometry. They still have trouble figuring out how to work it because it has a different integer in solving and problem solving. Um, so they tell us that they first had people creating cities at 300,000 BC. I run into this a lot. Academics like to argue this because they always like to say, India was first and we were first and Africa was first. And I say, you know what? The people who left the stone writings are first until someone else has discovered something new. Because a lot of these civilizations, I'm sure they existed, but they had no writing system. They had no mathematics system. And if the Sumerians are telling me that they, lived X number of years, et cetera, et cetera. And keep in mind, they used moon instead of the current calendar settings, but still, I look at it and go, why would they lie? Because they created time.
Wasn't the original Hebrew calendar also a moon calendar?
Yes, yes, yes. The Sumerian calendar was 13 months. Months were 20 days. So what they did is they just took the rest of the months and added on and come up with a 13 month according to, the way that we interpret calendars today. The month of January would have actually been the very first month, just like our calendar month, but there was a 13th month, which was in the zodiac signs, which was invented by Sumeria as well. The 13th month was a symbol of the serpent, and there is a serpent symbol in the sky that you could track star pattern. But everyone forgets to talk about that because it's easier to talk about the zodiac in a 12-month setting, which was invent again by, I believe, Edwardian calendar. I can't remember the name of the calendar now. That one's got me eluded, but I can't remember who invented the actual calendar of the 12-month cycle and the one we use today.
Yeah, and it's like you have to wonder how this civilization so long ago, if they were really the early civilizations, how they had such a wide range of technology. I mean,
Here's something.
they invented the wheel, cuneiform, like you were saying before, math, not to mention, numerous types of tools and everything, and it's, and then you see things like, what is it, Gobi Tepe,
Yeah.
that are now showing that perhaps, that's a 7,000-year-old civilization. And why were people burying themselves underground, in these mass tunnels,
Well, a lot of the Satanists I talk to would be really, really amazed to realize if you view that any type of hell, let me tell you how the Sumerians viewed underworld. The Sumerians meant Earth. So when people interpret the Sumerian writings and they see underworld refers to Earth. It's under the heavens. Okay. When you refer to the Kur, you're referring to similar to Gehenna or to Hades or the underworld of what they call the ghost land. And that was not ruled by Satan. That was not ruled by the devil, Lucifer, anybody. It was ruled by one cruel bitch that was called Ereshkigal. And Ereshkigal was derived into Hecate. But in Sumeria, Ereshkigal had no temples, had no followers, desired to have no followers until she got married to a deity called Nergal. When she got married to Nergal, then she built the first temple of the underworld, which would be under the sky, under the heavens, so on earth. But again, you can see that immediately all of the occultists start lining up and going, oh, Ereshkigal, evil bitch, she's a ruler of the underworld. She'll kill everybody with flames and whatever. No, she didn't care about humans. Humans didn't care about her. There were no temples to her.
I love history, and the stuff that you're talking about is always of great interest to me. And you could just dive deeper and deeper into it. But I want to kind of bring us back into time. No, not at all, because it's such profound discussion that I could really go on. But we
could have the show all week.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it is. I love all of that stuff, you know.
Thank you.
And to what I want to get back to is more about your brand of theistic
Sure,
Satanism,
sure.
and basically, like, how do practitioners of theistic Satan utilize and I guess, like, tell me about the ancient Church of God and how it
Yeah,
became, and then how it became the temple of Satan, and then how it became the temple of
yeah. People always get messed up by that, and I'll tell you the reason why.
sure.
We started out originally the temples of Satan, okay, with temples of Satan, and that was 1999, and we kept that for many years. And when we bought our office space and we ran our office space, it became the Church of Theistic Satanism, and we kept that for a long time, and we got rid of that, and we went over to what we call the Ancient Church of God. We had a good idea from the standpoint. I had a lot of people that were wealthy at that point, and they didn't want people to know that they were Satanists. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I never had a problem with telling people I was a Satanist, except for a brief period of my time when I worked for some people who were of Judaic background, and I was making a couple hundred grand a year. I wasn't going to get fired over it. So I subdued my, practices and kind of got off the internet a little bit in lieu of making some money. We changed the Ancient Church of God because it really never stuck. It really was a God being a universal term. We figured, okay, we could attract more people from Freemasonry, other things like that might
Mm-hmm.
fall under a different banner. Never stuck. We always had to fight and explain it, and et cetera, et cetera. So about 8 years ago, we had bought a Temple of the Serpent, which was a whole different thing, from another group, and they sold us the name and et cetera, but we held it. We just switched over to it again, and it was a nightmare with membership and et cetera, et cetera. But we're just going to keep the Temple of Serpent now. That's going to be our future name. We're not changing it back to anything of the past. People are all the time wanting me to go back to Church of Theistic Satanism, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not trying to go there. I'm just going to stay with what we did.
I think the first incarnation of temples of Satan,
Yeah.
I believe I read an article in USA Today years ago about they were discussing you guys, as well as what was it, the Satanic Temples
Temple.
brand,
Yeah. Yeah.
and can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, we a lot of people don't know this, and now that this has expired, we had a court gag order, the Satanic Temple, and we had one with them. And what had happened was, they had created a media blitz against the temples of Satan for this idea that we were killing goats. Okay, we never killed goats. Okay, that at least publicly, like they tried to explain. We just supported the idea of traditional practices of religion. And again, they were always of the idea we're trying to put a political spin on things. So with that, they decided to rail people against me because at that time, this was before Trump and before a lot of other things. I supported the Tea Party movement, which was just basically lower taxes, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of wrapped that up, and they were like Tea Party Satanists, and all these people, they started putting all this out there, but they always had the bigger media push than what I had. So I could never really combat it. I had to combat it with blog posts and just weak media that I could get my hands on to do it. My ex-wife, she appeared in USA Today and a lot of different magazines, and they kind of put a spin on it, that on her store and et cetera, et cetera. They just kind of put a bad spin on it. And it just was a mess. But we went to court. They tried to sue me. I countersued them, and the judge laughed at us and said it was an internet war. And he said, listen, he goes, 2-year gag order, Satanic Temple don't say anything, Temples of Satan doesn't say anything. This is just slander. I'm not warning anybody anything. They tried to sue me for $150,000. I laughed at them. I hired an attorney. They didn't expect it. And the judge laughed at us when we went to court, And it was kind of an embarrassing thing, but after it was all said and done, it didn't bother me. A lot of people say I went underground because of it. No, I went to work for a company, like I said, that was with some people who were Judaic, and they weren't too excited about me being a theistic Satanist. Never lost my faith. I still had our meetings. We still had. They didn't have Zoom then. I can't remember the platform. It was like Zoom, but it was GoToMeeting or whatever. We have our meetings on the weekend instead of going out and traveling all over the United States and meeting. So we never lost that end of things. We just had to kind of recoil it, and a lot of that's my fault because I didn't want to lose that position that I had. But we had a war with the TST. I'm not scared to go after them again. I just don't know if I want to fight anymore. I'm done fighting with people. You'll still see me once in a while fight with people here and there, but it's over something that, it's somebody's trying to mislead somebody or whatever. The Temple of Serpent, we're going to grow it even bigger, but we don't really try to recruit people. We look at people that just will come to us, have a discussion. Do you like what you see? Would you like to go to a meeting, Denver 2025? Do you want to go to a meeting, LA? You want to do a Zoom call next weekend, et cetera, et cetera. So we keep it rather light, but we make it tough on people. And what I mean by tough is we just don't let anybody in. You've got to have something about you in order to become a member. And it's not that we're trying to be elitist, but again, we don't want a whole bunch of people trying to burn down the local church hanging out, because a lot of my people do have very good jobs, and they don't, I have policemen, and I have, people that are school teachers and things like that as membership. And they don't want people running through the halls going, hey, Jack, at your elementary school, do you tell your students that you're a Satanist?
In fact, wasn't the individual that was representing the TST in that USA Today article, was her name Jax Blackmore or something like that?
Yeah.
Wasn't she actually asked to leave the organization because of like her radical
she supported it.
views?
Yeah, she wanted to do the first, they called it the satanic abortion or something like that, and it was her doing rituals of abortion. And I'll be honest with you, to me, I'm kind of one of those people that with abortion, even our view as a church as a whole, or a temple as a whole, views the idea of abortion as only in the event of, harm to the mom, or, rape or whatever. So we have a very open-minded, but we're not big on supporting the idea of we supported by the public funding abortions. It's not a form of birth control, so without stepping out onto a branch there too much, it's not that, as a church, we really are kind of, kind of pro-life.
Understood. And I think that's something that a lot of people who aren't, when they just hear the banner of Satanism, I don't think they understand just how diverse the beliefs within that moniker really truly are.
We're not liberals or
Where it could be,
conservatives.
that's what I mean. It could be
everything.
it's the spectrum is, from atheistic representations of Satanism to, true worship of an actual entity. Yeah.
We've been criticized in our, I call it our brand, because again, for me to come out and claim, a lot of people come out and claim I'm the real Satanist, no, I never claimed any of that. In our form of theistic Satanism, which was the first to get it legalized as a legal religion, so until they do that, they're just sects, okay? We set forth things like we're okay with guns. I mean, you can bring guns to church, okay? I mean, there's a lot of different things that we're okay with. A lot of people like to label that Christian or conservative or Trump supporters or whatever, but you know what? We don't care, because what you practice on the outside is not as important as what you practice on when you're in the walls or you're in a meeting. Just like a person's sexuality. I don't care who you're doing at home. It doesn't matter.
Well, our society likes to put everybody in categories and brands. So
yeah, and I don't do that.
you're either conservative, then you must be liberal, or if
Right.
if you're not left, then you must be right. There's no, and the way that the tribalism works is you have to subscribe to the whole menu. You can't conflict with, you can't be a left Democrat and be anti-abortion. You can't be a conservative and be like open to open border immigration. It's
Right.
just
Right.
like these tribes you subscribe to. You have to, the whole enchilada. There's no independent thought in these tribes, and that's what I kind of really don't like about those brands and names that we put on. Uh, you know,
We don't have a lot of that. I tell people,
each individual subject. Like if you're pro gun, then you must be conservative. Not at all.
right, right.
Not
And
at all.
I get,
Especially after all the shit that went down, with COVID and stuff, and
right.
some of the issues in the cities and stuff. I think that was a big realization for a lot of people that maybe taking their own protection into their own hands was a smart investment.
Well, the thing I always tell people this. There's nobody that really controls any form of Satanism per se. There's all these people pretending to want to, I call it pretending. They all want a piece of the pie. It's not a very big pie, okay? It really isn't. There's not a whole lot of theistic Satanists out there. There's not a million. There's not 100,000. There's maybe 1,000, okay?
Mm.
And that's a limited amount. But like I said, I don't recruit people. I don't go out there and I look for good, talented individuals. And you know what I find? Occultists from many paths, people like Crowley, people like Aquino, people like that. And we just get together, and when we figure out what we're talking about, we don't argue. We talk a lot about theology and how we can help one another and how we can help society. How we can do that. And we're not gathering together to build a bomb in the back room. We're not gathering together to build a magical, attack on anybody or any of that. We're gathering together people of like minds and people that want to talk about this and not fight. We separate Democrat and Republican and Independent and Green Party. Leave that at home. We don't, we like people walk in the room and go, "Hey, I'm a gay Satanist," or whatever. It's fine. We don't care what you're doing at home. "Hey, I'm a hetero Satanist." We don't care. We gather to talk about
it's all those labels.
Yeah, you talk
we gotta
about
wear all those
history.
labels.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, you don't like abortion. That's fine. Don't start arguing. You don't like guns. Those are topics that you can talk with your friends and relatives about. But when you're at our Zoom meeting or at our in-person meeting, we're trying to learn about deities. And I'm not, a lot of people would have me within my group or within theistic Satanism would have me try and rise among be some king shit of pope or whatever. When I was younger, I tried that. There's not going to be any pope. There's not going to be any high mucky muck of any form of the occult because it's too fragmented, and it's okay. It should be fragmented. People should have freedom to go and look at what they want to look at. When you come to like the temples of serpent, we don't care if you're a witch, if you're into we care about you as a person. Just don't stand there and argue, because we're not going to have an argument about whether atheism is right or witchcraft is right or paganism is right or Odin is right. We're going to bring people who are going to present certain things, almost like a presentation class. If you like it, great. If not, tune out. So we're a little different than some of these other groups and organizations. We don't try and sell you a whole bunch of self-published books or a whole bunch of tchotchkes or whatever. We're not trying to sell you more statues for your wall or more books to fill your basement,
Right. Or pay for level work to work your way up into.
Yeah. We don't charge. There's no charge to become a member. You just have to be a person who's sane, and you have to be a person who you can have a conversation with, and you have to be a person that's not trying to burn a church down, and you have to be a person who's not going to try and molest kids. Good. End of story. We don't care. Republican, you want to be a Democrat, whatever, that's all fine. Leave that at home. Leave that for the voting times. Let's just all hang out. Let's talk. Let's have an exchange, just like we used to do. but that all changed over time.
Well,
You know,
another theme that always seems to come up in our discussions, especially when I talk to Satanists, is the satanic panic and the fact that many opinions have a firm belief that we're seeing a resurgence in that type of satanic panic thinking.
you
Do you
know
have
what?
any
I'm
do you have any
probably the
thoughts
first
on that?
person. Yeah, and probably your listeners are going to trip out. There was a time period. I'm not going to cover it up. Okay, I have always been somebody who's been real open about this. Okay, there was a time period where a lot of kooks and crazies were involved in Satanism, and they were, having sex with minors and doing all kinds of crazy shit, burning kids. I've seen it firsthand. Okay, I was never involved in it, but it did occur. There was a lot of crazy stuff, even with the
It,
recent death of Aquino. I mean, there was a lot behind. I read his case.
yeah, there's also a lot of hollow allegations that were
Right.
thrown around by people, and it's been researched pretty thorough. The ones with these past regression things and
Mhm.
working with that particular psychologist. I mean, they have their own torrid history as well, and I think history hasn't served them well in the reflection, looking back at how that whole thing went down. But I understand, to your point, that there's wackos in everything. There's wackos in
There
government.
is.
There's wackos in
I agree.
Christianity. There's,
I agree.
and that, a lot of people weren't happy that I had EA Quetting on the show, and it's because of a nut job in England who killed two people that he had nothing to do with,
Right.
and people go, oh, his writings, and it's like, you know that's a slippery slope, because there's a lot of books out there that, like, okay, are we ready to ban the anarchist cookbook again because, knowledge, knowledge can't be given to people freely because of what they're going to do with it. And, it's just amazing how the, opinions that I saw for something that really the individual had no control over. I mean,
I'm a capitalist. If you want to write a book, more power to you. Just try to avoid frauding people in that book.
mhm.
I mean, that's all I tell people. But here's the other thing I tell people is,
Buyer beware.
yeah, but maybe write entertainment purposes only on the bottom or whatever. But the thing I tell people is there'll always be somebody who will come after you no matter what. And for years, when I was younger, people came after me. They don't really come after me now because I keep some of my life private from a lot of the world, and it's better that way. I'm not scared to tell people my name. People could probably find me if they hired a private eye or whatever. Whatever's fine. Okay, not scared of that. But the thing is there is a lot of things that go on, and I've been witness to a lot of things, probably more so than a lot of occultists out there, because I've always had the financial transportation to go look for it. But the thing I tell people is what's more important, a book or your deity? And I always argue this with people. There's a lot of authors out there, but the important thing is your deity. If you're a theist, okay, that's what's more important than an author. So you find your information about this from authors, yes, but you have to parse that with history to determine truths. Because if someone writes a book, I have no respect for an author and that will write a book and confuse Satan and Lucifer, or talk about Baal, or talk about Despater, or talk about all these characters as one and not understand that they're not, and understand their roots and things. To me, that becomes somebody creating a book only for capitalism.
Mm.
Most great authors create books because of their I guess love of the art, and that's one thing that Crowley did, and people like the predecessor, Franz Barton, people like that, they so enjoyed their art. And we can say Crowley frauded people. That's a whole nother argument in that regard. But really, Crowley still had his heart into it. Agrippa had his heart into it. These people had their heart into it. And in today's world, I see a lot less of that instead of more of that. I see books that are really weakly researched. I wonder if they just copied someone else's book. And that's why I read them.
And maybe so. And there's also a rash of AI books out there now that people are putting together where they just rip off other people's stuff, and
we're going to see more of that. But I can't sit up in some grand tower and be the judge. Years ago, I used to think I could run around and put out all these fires and attack all these people and expose all these people for being a fraud. And it cost me because those people ganged together and got after me. But the thing is, and I've never done anything fraudulent per se. When I was 18 years old, I wrote a bad check and got fined for it. Okay, that's the only fraudulent thing you'll find in my past. But again, the tribes will get together and create everything.
Well, just I think the guilt by association is pretty weak. It's like the dude that goes into the theater in Colorado dressed as the Joker and shoots up the fucking place. That doesn't mean that the guy that wrote Batman is a bad person or should be held accountable for it.
I had my shares of scandals. I mean, I've had people that claimed back in the day that they were Temples of Satan members, and then they were, then they went over and they converted to Christianity, and then, they killed somebody. I got investigated back, I don't remember what year it was, but by the FBI, and it was a nightmare. And it was simply because I signed a copy of a book that they had, and it was basically I gave them my copy of the Satanic Bible when I got rid of it, and I signed it as a gift. And the people killed their grandparents, and so then of course they blame me for it. So I get this idea of them blaming EA coding.
Right. That's exactly a good parallel to draw to, and it's like, how does one action equate to the other action? I don't really see the parallels, unless they wrote a letter like, hey, thanks for giving me that book and showing me the way that I had to kill my parents, buddy. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, I mean, I never seen nothing in Coating's books. I mean, personally, I don't think a lot of the guy, but a lot of people do, and that's more power, his capitalism, whatever else. But the thing is I don't I don't think that the world creates these little tribes and goes after them. I knew the girl that dated him that went after him, and she was mad because I wouldn't come on her side and go after him with her. So, I've been involved in these little spattles, I call them spats out there.
Right.
And it got to the point where she started to attack me because I wouldn't side with her. And I just wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in playing, battling EA coding or whoever she wanted.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of caught some shrapnel just being in the on the sidelines, or just kind of being spectator.
Trust me, I'm in such a strong relationship, and this girl's very beautiful, and you'll see her on the internet talk. But she was actually trying to convince me that Satan told her that she was destined to be with me. So, yeah, you see what I mean? It was she destined to be with Quaiding and everybody else in the whole occult world, and then I'm the last to get passed out to, or what? You know what I mean? I just, shit like that occurs all the time. I've had council members before go loony, things like that. But, the thing I tell people is there's a lot of negative. The negative is sometimes by people who are clawing. I mean, I've been attacked many times. I never claimed to be high mucky muck of anything. Right. I just happened to be honest with you, I had a big section of my life where I was successful, and I had nice cars, I had nice homes, I had beautiful ladies, and people thought that, I was getting it by selling my soul or whatever. No, I was getting it by working like a hard person, and along the way I was buying the best occult items and having the best swords and whatever else. But, the thing is it didn't make me better than anybody else, but a lot of people, I call them the sycophants, all tried to push me to that level and create me into a Charles Manson character. And I wasn't about to be that way. I never wanted to be that way.
Yeah, that seems to be the MO these days, to just slander and defame people and to shout it out or to post it out more than a person can defend themselves.
I
And
did my fair share of that. I used to be known as the Terminator. Okay. I used to come to your town, and if I even thought that something was screwed up with you and you were frauding people, I had posters on every telephone pole in your town. And you were the bad guy. You know what I mean? Or I would find you, or whatever. And back before cameras and back before a lot of things, you could drive up, beat someone's ass, and no one would know. That's the way we used to do it. But again, I'm considerably older than a lot of listeners. Probably, I'm 59 years old. So, back a few years ago, that's what we did. In Satanism, it was brutal. I mean, you might get your ass beat. I might beat your ass. We might show up at one another's house. We might throw a goat in your yard or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things that went on that couldn't be videotaped like it can today. But I still see it on the internet, but people are now playing it on the internet. Attack everybody, get bigger, get bigger, get bigger. It's okay. I mean, I see the biggest thing that people are trying to revive is and for the listeners who are listening that might not know me, in 2002, I owned a website called realsatanism.com. Now I see all the Satanists going out there going, I'm the real Satanist. My group is the real Satanic group. The real Satanic order. Okay. Opposed to who? Who's the fake? You see what I mean? How do you make yourself? I'm the real. I'm the only real. Okay. Come over and visit me sometime and let me have a theological debate with you. We usually can win that easy if you want to talk history. But the thing is it doesn't make me the real. It doesn't make me any better. I just owned the website one time. You know what I mean? So I let it go. It was dumb. It actually it was equal to, this site called Satanic International. I had 1,000 people, didn't know any of them. They were from all over the globe, and they had signed up, and forums, and it was just a simple little site of forums and posting pictures, and it was called realsatanism.com. I don't even know if any of these real Satanists of today or self-proclaimed real Satanists own that .com anymore. I don't.
Right.
Now
another question I wanted to ask you is, you alluded to that you have a cult collection of items or artifacts. Can you give us maybe a brief overview of what you're talking about, and maybe anything noteworthy to speak of?
My most noteworthy part of my collection is let's see, I've sold a lot of this stuff here recently. But my most probably prized possession was a 1698 copy of the the occult philosophies, the threefold occult philosophies of Agrippa. It was entitled different. It was written in Old French. I own MacGregor Mather's original letter opener. I own some Crawley artifacts. I own a lot of first editions. I own a lot of strange altar items that came from ancient times. Just oddball things that you don't see. Skeletons, dead pictures of people dead, tons of that. Tons of old skeletons. Just strange shit that would scare the pants out of most people. And,
I think a
I've
lot of people these
money.
days are intrigued with stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, odd taxidermy, and I still deal in it here and there. The lady that I intend on getting married to one day, her and I were going to relaunch a business, and it focused in on that in the days ahead, and kind of get back into it more. Mainly, I liquidated a lot of my collection because I had a divorce. It was a bloody divorce. I mean, not bloody where anybody died, but a knockdown, drag out court battle, and half my occult collection got taken by my ex in a court thing because she knew it was valuable. And then I lost some very, very nice swords that were Roman era, a lot of old epergnes, a lot of old glassware that was Roman era, signet rings from Roman era. I mean, things like that all got lost. It's okay, though. It's only stuff. You can get it again,
Interesting stuff. uh, what I would like to have you talk about now is any ongoing projects or initiatives that you guys are involved in, and what what can we expect from you in the near future?
I have in my website, theamericansatanist.com, that I always tell people just sign up for my newsletter. I don't spam anybody. It's one thing I don't do. I send you my newsletter, etc. I do some projects with a new magazine that is an old magazine called The Cloven Hoof. I've got a couple upcoming radio shows and stuff like that, but I've been rather low key. I've been kind of working now on putting a book that is very different. It's not a book to solve all, to be all, to tell you your fortunes, or claim that I can be the greatest teacher. It's a book about history, and it's a book about the history of Satan. But instead of going from the back, of going back the oldest, it's going to go to today, back to the oldest origin. And I'll probably have that done in about a year. And it's not just me, it's several writers, several people that are a little higher than me in the academic rungs that are going to contribute to it. And I'm working on that. But other than that, I'm getting ready. Sometime next year I'm going to get married, and I'm just kind of putting my life together at as I'm closing out my years. I'm 59, and I'm slowing down a little bit, but I'm not giving up, and I'll never stop being a theistic Satanist or stop, my rituals and prayers to Satan. And the listeners can argue about that. They're going, why do you call it Satan? Why do you call it other names? I just use it because it's more recognizable than the names I can tell you about today. In a sake of argument,
Dr. Tom, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was
A pleasure, by the way.
It was a great conversation, and like I said, I love talking about historical Sumerian and Mesopotamian history. It's always
I tried to keep it broad form. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I tell everybody this. It's hard to deal with me sometimes because I could talk for hours about these subjects, and it's just
and I
because
can
that's all
listen
I
for
really read.
and I can
I
listen
read
for
about this
hours.
stuff, and you're always welcome to call me and have a discussion with me. I'm good with that. I'm always open to that.
Well,
So
I hope to have you back in season 2 for sure.
thank you. I don't hide from anybody. I'm always open to talk about stuff to people. So
Again, a great pleasure having you on the show, and
thank you.
look forward to
Thank you for
talking to
having
you
me.
again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and your listeners. I hope you all have a great night, and hail Satan. Thank you.
Thank you.